Hey everyone, I go by V Lauren on social media, but you can call me Victoria, and welcome to a special episode of Witness to Glory. Moving mountains and dancing, got the keys to the kingdom. So over these last few episodes, I've given tips on how you can photograph people at church. And these are tips that I've been using and developing over the years as a church photographer. And I figured this is a good point in the series for me to talk about how employing these methods, I think, played a part in me having my first photographic publication. So I'm not going to waste your time. We're just going to dive straight into things. So I had booked a gig with the church through working with my mentor. And so this was my first time ever visiting and working with this church. And I think because of that day, it led to me having a years-long relationship working with the church and photographing their important events throughout the calendar year. This particular event, it was my first time ever visiting the church. I did not know anybody and nobody knew me. So a lot of times people will say it's all about who you know. But in my case, I'm like, I really didn't know anybody and nobody knew who I was. I'm an introverted person. I like to shoot in a very unobtrusive, fly on the wall approach. There were other photographers there. Their styles were different from mine. I was approached by a photographer by the name of Karen. And so we sparked up a conversation. She was actually like urging and encouraging me to go get your shots and stuff like that, right? She mentioned to me that, Gospel Fest is coming up. Would I like to accompany her to Gospel Fest? And I'm like, yeah. Like I was literally blown away. And she said she liked my spirit. And so that was it. That's the story. Like we could just end it right here. The reason why I bring this up, it's literally because that whole interaction, we're talking about it's all about who you know, which is true in a lot of ways, but it's like nobody knew me. I didn't know anybody. I came to the event because I had booked it. I had an assignment to do, and I was just doing my own thing. I wasn't trying to seek to make myself known. If you are an introverted photographer, you know what it's like when you have to head to a gig and it's like, okay, you sit in the car like, okay, you can do this. You can talk to people. Because I'm not a big small talk person. But I think what is loud about me is my work ethic. People will take notice of that. You remember I said this, while you're watching them, they're watching you, right? So it's like people will take notice of that. Even, if photographers would ask me for advice on what should I do? I'm like, just work. Because eventually the right people will take notice. You don't have to fight to be seen because people are already looking. I want to relay the story to encourage photographers whose personalities and dispositions may be me, who were maybe told that you have to carry yourself in a certain way in order to attain certain achievements. And it's that's not always true. And photography can seem intimidating for people who are introverted, but I like to see the positive aspects of introversion in that, as I mentioned in previous episodes, it makes me more of a self-aware and introspective and thoughtful and considerate photographer. If you are somebody who's introverted, don't let your introversion stop you, because some people might see it as a hindrance. I see it as a positive. In some ways, it can be challenging and difficult, but I realize that it's an opportunity for me to cast my cares and anxieties on the Lord and trust that He'll take care of me because I didn't create this opportunity. I believe He provided and opened the door for me to have this opportunity to do what I do. I figured since I'm a couple of years out when all this happened, that I can talk about my experience from this perspective and then also share, what it was like photographing my first big concert event. Gospel Fest is this big gospel music festival, especially in the Northeast. And it's been held, I think, at the Prudential Center since 2008. So the year that I went, it was held at the Prudential Center. I know they have changed into different locations throughout the years, but primarily it's held at the Prudential Center. And I remember growing up, it being televised. It was it's a big thing, especially in this area. And so the Gospel Fest was usually followed up by a tour. I think growing up, I did go to a couple of gospel. I don't think it was at Prudential though, but I think I went to a couple of their concerts as a kid, if I remember the advertising right. I think I saw Yolanda Adams. I also remember watching the choir competitions on TV growing up. So it's a big like Jersey event. This was my first time like photographing like a really big concert. So my first press pass experience. During that year, I was able to meet a lot of the photographers within the New Jersey community. Going to the event, I was able to meet like photographers that I was able to receive like other opportunities from in the future. And like even just recently, I had to like do portraits, and the way that I even got the opportunity to take portraits was because of a link that stemmed from going to this event. I was pretty much given creative freedom, like free reign to photograph how I please, and that, you know, my focus should be on photographing like some of those big stage names and like the behind the scenes interactions and getting those photographs. Gospel Fest is like it's a two-part. There's like a talent competition where they have dancers and singers competing, and then they have the concert. I photographed both parts of the event, and so what I carried with me was a 70-200 and a 16-35. I think both of those are f2.8. And so I had one body with me, which was a Canon RP. That's what I was shooting with at the time. And then I had portable charger, backup batteries, and SD cards. So I didn't want to have a backpack in the pit. I was able to fit everything into my Focus bag. Not sponsored, by the way. So I used that bag and I was able to fit everything in there. It was a little bit heavy, but also was convenient. And because I think we're still like adjusting post-COVID protocol, there wasn't that many accommodations for press. And I think they try to limit as much people that were behind the stage. I don't remember us even like having locker rooms or access to those spaces or areas. So the accommodations were very limiting. So it was good to have like an over-the-shoulder bag. But I tell you, that thing was heavy, okay? Anyway, to dive into some of the photos, I wanted to highlight how I approached photographing Gospel Fest, and I really wanted to emphasize storytelling. I am going to have an episode where I get more into detail about how to use storytelling and compositional techniques to enhance your photos as a church photographer. So during the talent competition, there are a series of photos that I feel like tell a story of their own, and they've really grown on me over the years. One of them is of this liturgical dancer. I like the movement in the shots, which I credit to shooting at a shutter speed of 1/400th of a second. Now, these aren't my favorite photos per se. They had like a screen in the background, and it was also like creating distortion. So I tried to shoot from an angle and photograph the side of the stage rather than like photographing straight on, because I just didn't like the background and how like it was creating this distortion, which I am going to have an episode talking about dealing with distortion. So stay tuned for that. And then also like you have the pianos and the speakers in the shot too, which I feel like take away from it and don't enhance it. But I think these photos work best solely because of the expression and movement of the dancer. Now, there were other photos that I took of the dance competition that I feel like they don't move me, pun intended. They don't move me. And the reason being is because I feel like they lack those storytelling elements that I think are essential for these other photos that I took of the dancers. Like the facial expressions are flattering, so I guess we can check that off, right? But none of them really tell a story to me. They show what is happening, and in some instances you lose the context in which the photos were taken. And I do believe that when it comes to photographic storytelling, context is important. So in order to take a photo that tells a story, you need to contextualize it. And in order to do that, your background and foreground should include useful elements so that the viewer can get a better understanding as to what the story is being told. And I feel like these photos don't really do any of that. Also, another aspect of storytelling that I think is important is emotion. So even if you take a photo where the context is lost to an extent, I believe where you can make up for it is by strong emotions. What feelings would the viewer have looking at the image? However, so moving on from the dance competition to the singing competition, I do feel like there are a set of photos that I think I love them for the first time that I edited them, because I feel like both of those elements are there. And to me, I just remember the story behind taking them. They've become like some of my favorite photos of all time. And actually one of them was a fluke. So there's that. So these set of images are personal favorites of mine because of the expressions of the singers. But my favorite photos of all time are these two black and white images. And I must say that the second, more out of focus, was a fluke. It was an accident. Flukes can be great, but you want to be intentional so that you can always get those type of shots because you're focusing, you know what you're doing. So this was accidental. My lens was not focusing on what I wanted it to do, and I was just kind of just like snapping, and I took the shot, and even though I saw like, oh, this is out of focus, I didn't realize in the moment. It was only like after editing it, I was like, oh, ooh, this is good. This is good, because the lady behind is in focus. And I think her facial expression is priceless. I've provided the context in that you get a shot of what's happening, or you can assume you know what's happening, and then there's the emotion, which is conveyed on the woman's face. This does a good job in conveying a story. Now, would you know the exact details of what is happening if you weren't there? Probably not, because there isn't like the additional signage to say this is Gospel Fest or anything, any sort of other elements in the background to convey that. But I think the image standalone without that context, it still works. You can piece together a nice story and make up whatever you want to make up in it. Also, I want to add that when I photographed the singing portion of the talent competition, that beyond the background and lighting, I do compose my shots based upon the expression and body posture of the singer. So I try to shoot, all of my subjects at flattering angles and catch them with facial expressions that show the person favorably, as well as the viewer, what the subject is doing. I feel like that's important. Now, before I go over the photos from the concert portion, I do want to discuss one of my favorite aspects of photographing events: candids. Candid shots are what I do. I love when I capture people enjoying the moment and they're so engulfed in it that they forget or don't even realize that I'm taking the photo. But these are some of my favorite crowd shots from the event. For this event, how I was able to get these type of crowd shots is because of my informal training as a church photographer. As a church photographer, probably like 99% of my work is just candid photos. You take me outside of the church and put me in other spaces and locations, I could do exceptionally well getting candid photos, because all of my time has been spent figuring out ways how to capture those moments of people while they're engaged in the moment. I think it's kind of heightened my candid photography skills doing church photography. And so it's no different photographing a concert, and that even though you have a lot of people, I can still look for those like quiet moments in the crowd of people and photograph those moments. So it's no different than how I would approach photographing Gospel Fest. Now, this photo specifically is interesting to me, and it's one that I normally wouldn't take, but I was kind of being like influenced by some of the photographers around me who shot with like this type of guerrilla style, like very in your face, like very intrusive. I was like, whoa. So here I have my Canon AL1. A lot of them were Leica users, and they had like their film cameras and stuff like that. And I mean, they had like the flash and everything. They were just like, I mean, in your face, right? Me, I'm like, right? Them, they were like, I mean, I was like, it was jarring for me. When you look at the outcome of the photographs, hey, Lord have mercy. There's a method to the madness and it works for them. It's just not my style, and that's okay. So I was kind of like really inspired by seeing that. So when I took this photograph, I was kind of thinking about like, it's not a shot that I would typically get, but I really like the sentiment behind it. So Gospel Fest, for context, was a day before Mother's Day. And so I thought this photograph just conveyed that. I don't know the relationship between the woman and the girl in the photograph, but it's the way the woman envelops a child that makes it sweet. And so on top of that, you have two people in the foreground and one with a do-rag. Now, this photo doesn't have a lot of context, admittedly. You do have two people sitting in the foreground and you see the woman and child embracing one another, but I think you can deduce that all of the people are watching something, which is enough for me. I don't know, let me know what you think about this shot. So after the talent competition wrap, the concert began, and it featured acts from Byron Cage, Richard Tolbert Jr., Stephanie Mills, the Clark sisters, and Hezekiah Walker. For these photos, I sought to get a variety of shots at different angles, basically searching for the it photo with each shot. Even with these shots, I try not to get, again, like the background in it, because it just was messing up my photographs. I found in some instances that the background was complementary to my subjects, and so I used it to my advantage. So when I photographed Byron Cage, the background of the stage was complementary to what he was wearing. So I implemented the background more in the shots, but still the jumbo screen behind didn't enhance the photos in any way, so I opted to keep it out of most of my shots and shot from the side of the stage throughout his performance. But as you can see in the photos of Richard Tolbert Jr., the background doesn't look that great in color, so I opted to not use it as much and angle the shots in a way that the background was nearly black because of the darkened, unavailable seating that was like way far up behind him. So for his performance, there was more movement, as usually it is with his performances. I photographed him on a number of occasions. They're very like lively and energetic. So I shot to capture those moments and moved around quite a bit to compose my shots in a way that would be more interesting and to like show the movement, to show the height. Now, the one shot that I captured of him leaning back, I believe it's not a really good shot, but it could have been if it were shot at a different angle and position. So that's my critique of myself. I also shot to capture the crowd, the movement of the crowd while he was performing. And he's very like high energy. So I try to get photographs of the crowd's response to him. So the photos that I captured of Stephanie Mills' set, I believe are the most unique, as I really use the jumbo screen to my advantage, as well as the darkened portions of the stage. So if you notice, the jumbo screen is showing portions of her jacket, and you can also see the stage's background. But I edited the photos in a way that the colors are all complementary to one another so that the background isn't entirely ruined by the screen. But since I wasn't like a big fan of the background, I shot at the sides of the stage, using the platform's floor lighting to add more light. So in my set of the Clark sisters, you'll notice how I utilize the background to provide more context to the photo. And for their performance, I use both the 70-200 and the 16-35. So with the 16-35, I used the screen to show how the four sisters were on stage, even though in my shot, you can only see three. Twinkie, who's the pianist, was positioned rather farther right on the stage, and the wider I shot, the more unnecessary elements were added to the photo. The platform was elevated, so if I photographed her with her three sisters, her face would be cut off by the top of the piano. So the only way for me to get her in the shot with the three sisters was to use the screen behind them to my advantage. So even though Twinkie's not in my shot, she still ends up being in my shot. And if you notice, I also tried to snap shots that were flattering to all four in the photo, which is not necessarily like the easiest thing to do, right? When you're photographing a group of people, especially when they're singing. I also used the background to show when Karen looks at Jackie with this endearing look. Even though Karen is looking away from my shot, you get to see where she's looking and her expression through the screen, which gives context. So you can see how I utilize the background to my advantage in instances where I felt that I was shooting at a disadvantage given the set of the stage. Also, I photographed from the pit, which if you've ever done concert photography, you know that the pit can be tight, right? And this pit was right in front of the stage and it was super narrow. I was actually informed that in the previous years, the pit was actually much larger, but this pit was narrow. The setup was, logistically speaking, not that great. It was kind of like a little bit of a nightmare, especially because like if you were, because the pit was like close to the stage like this, and then you had people sitting behind. So like if you're standing in the pit, you're blocking the people who are sitting down in the first row, which was an issue because then people in the first row were like mad at the photographers for being in the pit, but like they put the pit there for the photographers to be in there. So I was like, my goodness gracious. Tell you, when people pay to sit in the first row, they want to see what's happening. So anyway. So now for Hezekiah Walker's set, I kept swapping between the 70-200 and the 16-35 to get wide and tight shots of his performance. So since he had the Love Fellowship Choir, I wanted to use the 16-35 to capture as many of the choir members on stage as I could. I also shot at a low angle to, again, obscure the screen behind them, as I felt it would ruin the look of my shots. But I did use the screen to my advantage when the screen's camera was focused on him to indicate who was performing in the wider shots that I did capture. So this is my technical and creative rundown of how I photographed Gospel Fest, which also led to me having my photos being published for the very first time. So I relay my story hopefully to encourage photographers who are maybe shy or maybe socially anxious or introverted to know that it's okay. You don't have to beat yourself up for not being like a super outgoing person, for not being loud, or for putting yourself out there, because I'm telling you, if you keep your head down, continue to work, people will take notice and they will appreciate what you do. If you always make the focus yourself, I think people will notice that. But if you make the focus other people, which is our goal as photographers, people will also take notice. I can truly say these opportunities I did not provide, but the Lord did. Like, I really am humbled by the direction that my life has taken, especially as a photographer. And I can truly say that, like, I have been a witness to glory.